Hi, this is Stevie. I painted a little line and wash painting of these tomatoes that I had, and this is a great little project if you're just getting started in painting. So I've already drawn the tomatoes on a small piece of watercolor paper. It's just 5 by 5 inches, and I used a Micron permanent ink pen to do that. Now I'm flicking some water on the page. I like to get a little bit of a loose look, but I don't want to just soak the whole page with water. So I just flick some water on, and then some of the color may go outside the lines, and I like that look. So I'm starting out with my cadmium red, and I want to make sure that I can portray the roundness of these objects. So I want to be careful about where I place the darker values and the lighter values to give it that form. And here I'm dropping a little bit of transparent orange in up on the areas that would have more light on the tomato. And I love to watch that color mingle together. This cadmium red, this is Cad Red Light that I'm using, and it will lighten up quite a bit. I'll have to go back and add more to it later. It does have a tendency to lighten up a lot. And I want to preserve that white area that you see as a highlight on the tomato, and there'll be one on each tomato. And it may seem like a simple thing to do, but sometimes it gets away from you and you lose that. So I'm going to try very hard to keep it here. And I let some of that color, that red color, run out of the lines onto the area underneath the tomato that will become a shadow later. And I really like that because it helps to add some reflective color to the shadow. So I'm just going back. Now I'm using some alizarin crimson, which is a darker red, to go back to the areas of the tomato that would be the darkest, toward the bottom of it. And I'm wiping out a secondary highlight there just with my brush. I just wiped it off and wiped out a secondary highlight. It's not very bright, and you can see that in the photo too. Just finishing up that tomato, and then I'll move on to the next one. So next I'm going to go to that tomato on the left. And same process, start out with the Cad Red Light, go around the areas that would have the darkest value in the tomato. Have to make sure that I can preserve that white highlight. I just have to try to remember to do that. It's easy to forget. And that I like the orange color against that red. It looks really nice. So there I was trying to make the two highlights together, the secondary highlight as well as the main highlight. And I had to tone down that secondary highlight. It would have been too white. It would have been too much. So just going back in, and then I'll be adding my alizarin crimson to it, the darker red, in the shadow areas. That's the alizarin. And I'm trying to keep these layers fairly thin. I really like the transparent look of this color, and I don't want to get paint so heavy that it just turns opaque. I think the beauty of watercolor is its transparent look. And there I'm pulling out a little bit of that color at the bottom of the tomato purposely so that that'll become part of the shadow later on. And there was another highlight that I noticed in that photo that I'm just trying to indicate with my brush. I wiped off my brush so that it was dry and just pulled out some of that color. I may have added a little bit of the orange color to that. I don't remember. Just continuing to go around, adding more color where I think it's needed. Going back now to that first tomato to get a little more color in there. That is going to be a shadow from those little leaves that are on the top of the tomato. I may have to go back and reinforce those again, but I just wanted to get a mark on there so I remember to put them in. Now again, going back to the first tomato, adding more color, more of the Cad Red Light and some alizarin crimson, just to get a little more color on the tomato, since it has lightened up now that it dried a bit. And look how nice those orange and red colors look together, and I love the way they just mingle together. And I really like, even though it's line and wash, and you might think of line and wash as being a very tight process, I like letting a little bit of the color go outside the lines. I think it adds a lot of personality to the painting. Now the third tomato, I'm working on that. Same process, starting out with the Cad Red light, being careful to go around those areas that are going to be the green leaves. And it's hard to do in those tight spaces. Sometimes you can't help getting some of the red color in there. But I'll deal with that later on. I can either try to lift some of that color or just incorporate it into the leaf. There again, there's a little highlight on the top right side of that tomato. I'm trying to keep that. Really working in between those little leaves that I've drawn. Working around. Getting a little more orange color at the top. Ooh, I have to be careful there or I'm going to lose that highlight. I'm just going back where I think it needs more paint and adding a little more color. That's my alizarin crimson that I just picked up. That's the paint well for alizarin is out of this image. You can't see that, but there's a little on my palette. I'm just trying to separate those two tomatoes there by getting some darker color on the left side, the left tomato. You can see that it takes a few passes to get enough color on there to make it look right. Again, working around those little leaves. This is a nice little painting for a beginner because it only uses a few colors. The reds, the alizarin crimson and Cad Red light, and some orange color, and then some light green and dark green. And really you could get by with just dark green if you needed to. It's a great little lesson for drawing too, to learn how to do line and wash where you start out, when you draw it, you start out with your object that is most in the front. And then you start there and then draw backward, and that is so that the lines don't cross over each other as you paint, as you draw. It teaches you a lot about drawing. That's one of the things I really like about line and wash. And here I'm just taking it over to my heat gun for a minute to dry it off so that I can go back and work on the leaves, do some touch-ups on the red. It was getting a little too wet, so I needed to do that. Here I'm going back in and reinforcing those shadows again. And I'm sorry it's out of the picture. I didn't realize after I came back from the heat gun that my paper was down low on the table, but that'll get fixed here in a minute. But at least you can see where I'm working on the top of the tomatoes. Getting the shadows in, and then I'll start on the leaves. And I don't really care if some of the color gets onto the leaves. You can see I've gotten some orange color on the leaves in the front. Now I'm starting to work on the stem, and I'll work on the leaves. And what I did was I added some water to that stem because I wanted the color to just sort of float on. And that's a green gold color that I'm using there. And you could use yellow as well. Just something lighter than the dark value of green that I'm going to add later. So I'll continue on with that light green color on the stems and then the little leaves, and then go back and add some darker green in areas where there's less light or shadows. Here I'm starting to add some darker green. I mixed sap green with a little bit of ultramarine blue to get that darker green color. I don't usually use sap green all by itself. It's kind of a garish color to me, so I generally mix it with something else. So just referring to my photo really to see where the light areas are. So where I want to, or where the dark areas are, where I want to apply the darker green color. And just moving around. And now look on that front tomato where I had some orange on the leaf. Now that I've added the green to it, look how nice that looks. So that's sort of a happy accident. But that's why I wasn't too panicked about that. Those things happen, and a lot of times they turn out to be just really nice things for the painting. So working on that stem, referring to my photo to see where the darks are. I'm using Princeton brushes for this painting, and that's what I believe that's a Princeton round number 2 that I'm using there to get in that tighter area. I really like Princeton brushes, and these are their synthetic bristle ones. It is the Princeton, there are 2 series, Princeton Heritage and, oh, I can't think of the other name, but it's not the Neptune brushes. The Princeton Neptune brushes are great brushes, but they hold a lot of water, and they're not really good for line and wash. They put too much water on the paper. So Velvet Touch. It's either Princeton Heritage or Princeton Velvet Touch that I use on these line and wash paintings. So there I just picked some French ultramarine, and I mixed it with water and applied it to the shadow areas, and I applied it over the red that was already there, that reflected red, and look how nice that looks. And I just dropped a little bit of my transparent orange into that color. And there you have it, my tomato trio painting. Thanks a lot for watching, and please leave a comment if you have a question. Thanks again.